Good morning and welcome to this weekly market update from AGM Markets. There's the 28th of August 2014. What I'm going to do today is go through some technical analysis on Euro dollar, cable, dollar Swiss, Aussie and gold, just to review what's been going on in the markets this week and give some sort of outlook for next week. I will not make any trade calls or recommendations in this video. You do trade at your own risk. If you could please read our full disclaimer, which is on our website at www.agmmarkets.com, then that would be most appreciated. And for any new followers out there, we have 3 moving averages on each of these charts. The red one is a 50 simple moving average, the purple is 100 simple, and the gold is a 200 simple moving average. Okay, let's have a look at the euro dollar charts. This is a brief look at the weekly, what's going on in terms of the weekly perspective. And what we've been talking about is this fib move here. So this is from the low of 2013 to the high of 2014. In the last couple of weeks, we spoke about how we had that sort of brief sort of hold at the 50% level, which was at one spot of 33.70s with that 100 week moving averages there, as well there acting as brief sort of support. But notice that we had the 200 week moving average sort of capping that, and you can see last week we had a heavy sell-off on euro and we closed below the 61.8% retracement. And you can see this week, I mean, nothing major has happened in terms of compared to last week's candle. But I'll just flip it to the daily. You can see we've had a slight sell-off. It's come back up just shy of the 61.8, and that's sort of capped as the resistance. In terms of the actual level, it's pretty much the 132s. You can see is the sort of key resistance on the euro in terms of that daily there. But back to the weekly. So I mean, the only other level to keep an eye out for, in my opinion, in terms of these sort of weekly fib, is we don't normally look at it on these videos. It's just like to sort of keep it simple with the sort of 50% and the 61.8. But in terms of an interesting fib law, the 78.6 is one other to keep an eye out for, I think, in terms of this fib move. And that the reason being is because it coincides with a nice round number being the 130 marker. There's also a brief bit of a support there as well. At that level, you can see also back here sort of lows 2011 as well. But yeah, that, I mean, bear in mind, just because we're below the 61.8, you thought the odds would be that we continue to go towards the downside. And the other move to look out for, I think, is this move here. So that's from the lows of 2012 to the high of 2014, and that 50% comes in at the same level pretty much. So I'm going to draw that old fib back on. You can see, bam, right there, pretty much the 130.70s, 130.20s there. So very interesting sort of confluence, those two big fib levels. So in terms of the weekly perspective, that's pretty much it. And let's flip it to the daily and what's been going on. There's nothing major to sort of talk about in terms of this daily chart. In terms of what's been going on this week, you can see that it's been quite choppy. The last sort of 3 days, you can see, well, the last 4 days actually, we've been below this 132. We've come up, we've tested this level, and we've closed below. And today's candle, you can already see we've come up to this 132 handle and come back down. Sellers come back in. You can see it also on the sort of 4-hour chart there as well. And sort of 1-hour chart as well there, you can see. Not as technical though. But yeah, that's pretty much it. In terms of the sort of 4-hour, it's all about in terms of key sort of support. So the main support the last couple of days has been this sort of the 131.60s. You can see that's been the key sort of support there, but it has been quite choppy. In terms of sort of 1 hour, there's been a small sort of gap there as well, so do keep an eye out on that. But it's still, in terms of the technicals, it's been very interesting. In terms of short-term sort of plays, there's still been some interesting levels out there, notably that 132s, and then of course you got 131. Well, that 131.60s has been a great level, or 131.50s if you want to just keep it nice and simple with the sort of the 50 pip increments. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the nothing else major to sort of note of there. So let's flip it towards cable and what's going on in terms of this weekly chart. And last sort of few weeks, I personally said keeping an eye on this 50-week moving average. It looks like it wants to come back down here after having such a strong move through all of sort of 2013 up to 2014. You can see we've had how many? So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weekly candles in a row, and you can see we're testing this 50-week moving average, and it's getting some sort of brief bounce. I mean, it has technically last week. It did. I think it's pretty much as a close below. So this week, I personally would not be surprised to see it close below this 50-week moving average. But it's a small sort of retracement candle, nothing major to speak about. But I mean, in terms of the fibs, this is the only one to really keep an eye out for, I think. The only other one is this move here. Remember, so this is one that we have been speaking about. So this is the fib from the low of 2014 to the high of 2014. And it hasn't really had any sort of major sort of support at these levels, but interestingly, it has had resistance. So you can see our resistance at that 50%, and you can see we had a resistance at the one spot at the 61.8% retrace level. And similar to euro, a nice sort of round number has been capping the market this week. So on euro, it was 132s, and on cable, it's 166. As you can see, it's been the key sort of line in the sand on this daily chart. So pretty much there's about 3 or 4 daily candle tests. Upper wicks have formed, and we've closed below, and the same looks like it's going to close today. Of course, we're doing this on a Thursday evening, this video, and normally on a Friday. But so yeah, keep an eye on the sort of weekly close on that. It does look like it's going to close below. And then interestingly, actually, this 78.6 could be a decent level, because we do have previous support at that level as well. That comes in at one spot 64.53. So keep it nice and simple with a nice round number there being 164.50s. That should be a key sort of option expiry level, I'd have thought. So that could be an interesting level that may be in play next week if we get some sort of sell-off at the start of next week. And of course, we'll have NFP next Friday as well. So do some sort of preview video of that next Friday. So yeah, that's the 4 hour in terms of the sort, and that's the daily chart, sorry, and the weekly done. In terms of the 4 hour, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You can see that. I'm just going to zoom in here. You can see 166 has just been the key level this week. Multiple tests of that level, closes below. Even if I flip it to the 1 hour chart here as well, you can see multiple tests of that level, nice reversal candles. Interesting actually in terms of sort of counter move. If you're a sort of bull thinking it's going to retrace towards the upside, this has been an interesting fib level today especially. This is pretty much the lower of the chart to the higher of the chart. You can see the 50% which came in at one spot 65.75 has been acted as an interesting support. It does have moving averages at that level, but you can see it's just struggling to sort of bounce up. Anytime we have had a brief pop off this level, it's just got capped at that 166 level. So 166 key line in the sand for the rest of the week, and I would have thought going into next week as well. Interesting actually in this 4 I got the 50 SMA line up as well, so big resistance there. It's got the 61.8, the 166 and that 50 SMA all on that 4 hour chart, capping cable currently, so still looking quite heavy. Let's flip it to dollar Swiss. What's going on the dollar Swiss chart in terms of this weekly? Interestingly, we had last week a weekly close above the 100 SMA and 200 SMA as well. So the fib I've been speaking about on this weekly chart is the fib from the high of 2013 to the low of 2013. And it looks like it wants to continue to sort of grind high towards that 50% level, which comes in at 0.9268 there. So this week is just a small sort of retracement candle, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it close above that. If we do get a close above the 100 and 200 there, then I wouldn't be surprised to see a quick sort of move towards that 50%. But if we get a close below, then we can start seeing a sort of a retracement down towards this sort of fib move here. That's on the daily. The reason I'm taking that fib move is because that's the most sort of recent swing low, and it's just been playing sort of dips on this sort of dollar Swiss chart. You can sort of see there. You can see that on the weekly there as well. So that's the sort of the swing low from the trend line. So that's pretty much the view on the weekly and the daily as well. To be honest with you, that's the main fib to keep an eye out for. It's a very interesting 50% level as well, I think. Because it coincides with a nice sort of round number, probable option expiry level being that 0.91 handle. Previous resistance at that level, multiple candle tests, closes below, so big previous resistance could turn into new support on this dollar Swiss. And if you flip it to the 4 hour, it's the same thing as well. So 50% has some previous support at that level with the same fib move. The only other interesting thing to take note of is the sort of counter fib move here. So it's a small move, which will be valid on the sort of 4 hour and 1 hour chart as well. You can see the nice fib move currently in play, so nice downtrend, nice retracement towards the upside. 50% comes at 0.9155s, and we have the 100 SMA and the 50 SMA coinciding with that level as well, acting as a nice resistance there. So it is struggling to sort of fall down, but you can see multiple spikes and the sellers coming in, keeping it below that. So that's a sort of nice sort of small intraday move that is in play. Aussie on the weekly is still chopping around. In terms of the weekly chart, in between the sort of 0.9227s and the sort of the 0.94 handle. So that's pretty much it in terms of the weekly. It's very self-explanatory, pretty much well from sort of February, April time. Currently it's just chopping in between that level. I still say the bias is towards the upside, mainly because that 50-week moving average, which you can see acted as nice sort of support last week and coincides with that big support. That's one reason why I think we're sort of keeping up and above the water here at the sort of 92 handle. So odds I still think are towards the 100-week moving average here, but of course it can still just keep on continuing to chop in between this level. And in terms of sort of shorter term time frames, in terms of the daily, you can still see it's between those two levels been very interesting as well. And then you've got sort of mid ranges, so 0.93s. So I'll just zoom back in actually so you can see it clearer. Yeah, so 0.93 sort of 40s. You can see there's been a lovely previous support there, previous resistance as well. We've got another nice sort of support level here, which is 0.9260. So in terms of playing sort of short-term ranges, it's been very, very interesting, very sort of technical as well. So, and in terms of the fibs, actually, one interesting fib that's been interesting today, especially, has been this move here. So that's pretty much from the high of this daily chart zoomed in. You can see it there, high of that sort of wedge play, if you want to call it. To that sort of swing low, this 50% at 0.9369s. It's been acting as nice resistance. I'll just flip it to the 4 hour so you can see it there as well. So a couple of sort of candle wick tests and closes below. I'll just flip it to the daily as well. Lovely 1 hour reversal we had there today. A sort of brief sort of sell, and it looks like it wants to come back down here. So just still chopping around on Aussie, but it doesn't mean that it hasn't been interesting to trade, or there hasn't been any sort of interesting trade opportunities, because there definitely has been in terms of sort of trading those levels on the Aussie. Okay, that's the Forex done. Let's have a look at gold, what's going on the weekly chart. Similar to Aussie, it's been chopping around as well. In terms, it's more interesting on the daily, I think it's a bit more clearer as well. So there's been multiple sort of fibs that have been in play on this gold chart. This is the first one here we spoke about, remember, so nice test of the 50% retracement, 50-day moving average, brief bounce up, we came back down to the 61.8, we bounced back up, and then we got sold off for that counter move there, remember, at the sort of 61.8, it's 50%, it came back down, and then we got support off a nice sort of round number, which was the 1275, sort of 1275 50s, or just call it 1275s, it's easier. Lovely support there. So the next move that is in play in terms of move to, so I'd say that that long move isn't as interesting. Of course, it's still very good to scalp off, I think, because the levels are still in play. But this sort of fib move here, it hasn't quite reached the 50%, but it's sort of got front run at this level. But you can see the 200-day moving average and 100-day moving average have been acting as interesting resistance currently today as we speak. So I'll just flip on the 4 hour chart so you can see there as well. It may still continue to grind high towards this 50% level. That comes in at 12.97, spot 84. So, and that's pretty much the move in terms of the sort of gold chart. And if you look at it on the weekly, it does look like it's sort of grinding lower. And of course, you've got this sort of trend line support here as well. So yeah, I mean, it is technically sort of, well, it is technically sort of, we'd say it is in that sort of uptrend there, but it is also in a sort of wedge as well. So it just needs a sort of breakout, I think. It's still slowly sort of chopping in between this level, but there's definitely been some interesting scalping opportunities on gold in the sort of shorter term time frames. So yes, they're the fib moves and the sort of levels to keep an eye out for on gold, I think. Actually, one other level is you definitely have to keep an eye out for, I think, is 1300 as well, key round number. And you can see it's just been sort of chopping in between that. If you flip it towards a 4 hour, or actually on the daily, you can see there's been some interesting sort of opportunities off that. It's still one to keep an eye out for in terms of a big sort of option expiry level. There should be some interesting orders around that level. But yes, that's the view on gold. That's it for this week's video. I hope you found it useful. If there's any other pairs you want me to take a look at next week, then feel free to comment under the YouTube channel or send us a tweet to our Twitter feed, which is at AGM Markets. Hope you have a great rest of the week trading, and I'll catch you next week. Thanks for watching.